Manhattan shimmered beneath Nathan Pierce's penthouse windows, a city of glass and steel that bent to his will. He stood alone before the floor-to-ceiling glass, sipping a double espresso, watching as the skyline shifted from silver morning light into golden afternoon haze. At 35, Nathan had everything a man was supposed to want: wealth, power, a company worth billions. He was the Wall Street Journal's financial visionary of the year, the kind of man who didn't wait for opportunities but manufactured them, ruthlessly cutting anything or anyone that slowed his ascent. His phone buzzed on the marble counter, another update on the Westlake acquisition. He ignored it. For once, he wanted silence. The silence didn't last. "Mr. Pierce," came the polished, neutral voice of his home assistant system. "There is a visitor at the main entrance." Nathan frowned. He hadn't scheduled any meetings today. Sunday was sacrosanct, his single day reserved for reviewing financial reports without interruption. "Send me the feed," he ordered. The smart screen bloomed to life, showing the lobby of his building. A small figure stood at the reception desk, a girl, 6, maybe 7. Blonde hair pulled into uneven pigtails, backpack too large for her narrow shoulders. She shifted from foot to foot, her sneakers scuffing against the marble floor. Nathan set his espresso down slowly. "Is she alone?" "Appears so, sir," the AI replied. "Security reports no accompanying adult." Unease prickled across his skin. Kids didn't just wander into Pierce Tower. It was a fortress, armored glass, retinal scanners, security staff trained to recognize threats before they crossed the threshold. Whoever she was, she didn't belong here. "Send someone to help her find her parents," Nathan said briskly, already turning back toward his laptop. But 15 minutes later, his private elevator chimed, irritated. The words hollowed out the room. Nathan felt the city vanish, the empire he had built collapsing into silence. "Daddy." He stared at her, really stared. Blonde hair like Becca's, but those eyes, those piercing, electric blue eyes. His eyes, the same ones that looked back at him from every mirror, every magazine cover. "That's not possible," he whispered, even as his mind began to do the math. 6 years, 9 months. The timing fit. Emily reached into her backpack and pulled out a photograph. She thrust it into his hand, a hospital picture. Becca, younger, exhausted but radiant, cradling a newborn. "My mommy said I should never bother you," Emily said softly. "But you fired her last week and now she can't stop crying. And I heard her tell Aunt Sarah we might have to move away forever." Nathan's hands trembled as he held the photo. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All he could see were those eyes, his eyes, staring back at him from the face of a little girl who had just turned his perfect, calculated life into chaos with one devastating truth. He had a daughter. The elevator doors opened with a muted chime, and Rebecca Mitchell stepped out like a storm contained inside human form. She didn't hesitate, didn't pause to take in the penthouse's expanse of marble, steel, and glass. Her eyes went straight to her daughter, Emily, who stood small and defiant in the middle of the room, clutching her pink backpack like it was both sword and shield. "Mommy!" Emily's voice broke the tension as she ran forward, sneakers squeaking against the polished floor. Rebecca dropped to her knees and caught her, pulling the little girl so tight it looked as though she meant to weld her back into her body. She kissed Emily's hair, her relief unraveling into something closer to anger. "You cannot disappear like that again," Rebecca whispered fiercely, brushing a trembling hand across her daughter's cheek. "You scared me half to death." Emily looked up with earnest innocence. "But Mommy, I had to. He needed to know." She glanced at Nathan, her blue eyes steady. "I told him." Rebecca froze. For a fraction of a second, her eyes closed, pain flickering across her face. When she opened them again, her focus shifted like a laser to Nathan. "What did you say to her?" Nathan felt the heat of her glare, 1,000 unspoken accusations in those green eyes. "Nothing," he said, raising his hands, palms open, as though she might actually strike him. "She showed up in my lobby, alone, demanding to see me. I didn't believe her at first, but then she said her mother's name." Rebecca's voice was sharp, each word clipped. "You had no right to bring her up here." "I didn't bring her up," Nathan countered. "Your daughter bulldozed her way past a fortress of security and called me daddy. What was I supposed to do, turn her away? Pretend I didn't see the truth written all over her face?" Rebecca's lips parted at his choice of words, but she held her silence. She adjusted Emily on her hip, protective arms coiled around the child. Emily looked back and forth between them, sensing the tremors under the surface. "Are you going to fight?" she asked softly. Rebecca smoothed her daughter's hair. "No, sweetheart, just talk." Her voice was steadier than her grip. Why don't you sit by the telescope, see if you can find the moon? Emily obeyed reluctantly, dragging her backpack across the floor with a soft scrape. She climbed onto a chair by the window and pressed her eye to the scope, oblivious that the lens was useless in daylight. Now the adults faced each other, unmasked. "Why didn't you tell me?" Nathan demanded, his voice low but edged with disbelief. 6 years, Rebecca. You left during the Meridian deal and disappeared. No explanation, no word, nothing. You let me believe you just walked away. Rebecca's throat worked, her jaw tightening. Because you made it very clear what your priorities were. Do you remember that call you took the morning I came to your office? You told investors that nothing would stand in the way of that merger. Not board politics, not personal distractions, not anyone. He stared at her. I wasn't talking about you. You never were, she said softly, bitterly. Nathan's chest tightened. You decided for me. You took 6 years of my life, of her life, and erased me from it. Her eyes flashed. I did it to protect her. What do you think would have happened if I'd announced to the board that their Golden Boy CEO had a baby with one of his analysts? HR would have crucified me, Nathan. They would have painted me as the schemer and you as the victim, and she would have been the scandal in the middle. You could have told me privately, he said, softer now, struggling between fury and regret. You could have trusted me. I couldn't risk it, she said, and the words trembled with something closer to grief than anger. You were chasing billions, Nathan. I was just trying to keep a roof over our heads. From across the room, Emily piped up suddenly, her small voice slicing through the tension. The stars are sleeping right now. That's why I can't find them. Both adults turned. Nathan's eyes stung as he watched her frown at the scope. Still determined, still trying. His daughter. When he turned back to Rebecca, his voice cracked. Safe? You call this safe? Safe means I didn't know she existed. Safe means strangers saw her before I did. Safe means I nearly lost her before I ever had her. Rebecca swallowed hard. You don't understand. Someone already knows she's yours. Nathan went rigid. What do you mean? Rebecca hesitated, then lowered her voice. When they fired me, 2 men came to my office. They didn't just take my laptop, they cleaned everything, wiped drives, locked accounts, even demanded personal files. On the way out, one of them said, "Shame your daughter looks so much like him." Nathan's blood went cold. Someone inside your company knows the truth, Nathan, she whispered. Her arms tightened protectively around Emily as if the walls themselves were listening. And they're making sure I stay silent. Nathan turned toward the window. Outside, the skyline glittered like it always had. But for the first time in his life, it didn't look like victory. It looked like a battlefield. The penthouse no longer felt like home. For Nathan, the glass walls that once signaled triumph now looked like fragile barriers. Transparent, exposed, defenseless. He had built this fortress to display his power, but all it took was a little girl's voice, calling him daddy, to reveal how hollow it truly was. Rebecca's words still rang in his ears. Someone already knows she's yours. Nathan couldn't sit still. He moved across the floor in restless strides, his thoughts colliding like cars in a pileup. For years, he had trusted his company like an extension of himself. Now he saw cracks, deliberate ones, as though someone had been chiseling at the foundation while he'd been too obsessed with empire building to notice. He turned back to Rebecca. She was sitting tensely on the sofa, one arm wrapped protectively around Emily. The little girl leaned against her mother's side, sipping the water Nathan had poured earlier. For a moment, the scene almost looked domestic, but there was no comfort in it, only a fragile, precarious quiet. What exactly did you find, Rebecca? Nathan's voice was low, roughened with something that felt dangerously like fear. Her hand tightened on Emily's shoulder. You think I was fired because of budget cuts? That was the story HR wrote down. The truth is, I was auditing Westlake's books before the acquisition, and what I found didn't add up. Nathan's eyes sharpened. Numbers? Numbers that didn't exist, Rebecca said. Subsidiaries in Asia, supposedly thriving, profitable, but the ledgers were off. Revenues inflated, debts hidden behind layered shell accounts. On paper, Westlake looked like a gold mine. In reality, they're sitting on nearly $300 million in liabilities. If Pierce Investments buys them, that debt becomes yours. The words slammed into him harder than any market loss. That's impossible. My team scrubbed every line. No, Rebecca said firmly. I scrubbed every line. That's why I was erased. I was too close. Someone needed me gone before I could put the full picture together. Nathan's jaw clenched. Thomas Harrington. He hated how natural it felt to say his CFO's name, how obvious the betrayal suddenly seemed. Rebecca gave a short, bitter laugh. Of course, he was in every meeting pushing Westlake harder than anyone. Too hard. The morning I was escorted out, one of his men leaned in and said, her voice broke for a second before she steadied it. He said, "Funny how your daughter looks so much like him." The room went cold. Nathan's blood surged with equal parts fury and dread. Emily, sensing the shift though not understanding it, set her glass down carefully on the table. "Are we still playing the quiet game?" she asked softly. Rebecca smoothed her daughter's hair. "Yes, baby, just for a little longer." Nathan crossed to his desk, pulling up Rebecca's HR file. Redundancy. Terminated. The word glared at him in sterile black text, but below. WIT, he found her last performance review. Indispensable. Innovative. Integrity beyond reproach. His own digital signature approved it. She had been one of his best, and yet 3 weeks later, she was gone. Nathan's computer screen flickered. Then, without warning, the interface shifted. His secure desktop dissolved into a black field, white letters crawling across it. "You're digging where you don't belong, Nathan." Rebecca inhaled sharply. "What is that?" "An intrusion," Nathan muttered. He stabbed at the controls, initiating a lockdown protocol. "Talon," he snapped into his earpiece, summoning his chief of security. "Trace it, now." On the other end, Talon's voice was clipped, urgent. "Already working it. Whoever's inside your system, they're not amateurs. They're routing through multiple international proxies. The signature we're seeing, a pause, deliberate, heavy. It leads back to Artemis Global." Nathan's gut twisted. Artemis Global, a name buried in minor expense reports he'd skimmed a dozen times, a shell company that billed consulting fees so small they slipped beneath notice. He'd assumed it was routine. It wasn't. Before he could speak, his phone vibrated with a call from an unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Pierce." The voice was male, smooth, calm in the way a predator is calm before the strike. "You've had a good run, but you should have left Westlake alone." Nathan's grip on the phone tightened. "Who is this?" The voice ignored the question. "You've built a fine empire, but empires fall faster than they rise. Keep digging and you'll learn that firsthand. Rebecca Mitchell already learned. Consider this your last warning." The line clicked dead. Nathan stared at the screen, pulse hammering. Rebecca's face had gone pale. Who was it? "Someone who knows too much," Nathan said. "Someone inside." "Thomas," she whispered. "It has to." The fury in Nathan's chest was molten. If he's orchestrating this, then he's not just risking my company. He's threatening my daughter. The word hung in the air. Daughter. Raw, untested, but truer than any balance sheet he'd ever read. From her corner of the sofa, Emily spoke again, quiet but perceptive. "That man on the phone. Was he one of the bad guys?" Nathan turned. Her small face was tilted up, blue eyes impossibly clear. The innocence in her question tore through him in a way no corporate betrayal ever could. He crouched down to her level, his voice steady but heavy with promise. "Yes," he said softly, "but I won't let them hurt you." Rebecca's arms tightened around Emily, but her gaze locked on Nathan. For the first time since she'd stepped back into his life, her anger cracked, replaced by something else. Fear, trust, reluctant recognition. "Then you'd better be ready," she whispered, "because they already know she exists." Nathan rose, fury sharpening his resolve. The empire he had built was under siege, but for the first time in his life, it wasn't the empire he cared about saving. It was Emily. And if Thomas Harrington thought he could use her as leverage, he was about to learn what it meant to wage war against a father. Outside, down on the street, a black SUV idled. Its tinted window rolled down just far enough for a camera lens to glint in the dying light. The building's walls of glass reflected the predator's gaze back at the penthouse. The hunt had already begun. The boardroom of Pierce Investments had always been Nathan's throne room. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened to Manhattan's skyline, a kingdom built on steel, numbers, and his will. The table was a sleek slab of black glass, its edges polished sharp enough to cut. 12 leather chairs surrounded it, seats for power, wealth, and loyalty, or at least the illusion of those things. Today the room felt like an ambush. Nathan entered at precisely 9, his stride measured but weighted. He could feel the eyes of every board member on him, calculating, wary, some predatory. At his side, Rebecca walked with a quiet resolve, her chin lifted, but he could see the tremor in her hands. She wasn't a Wall Street gladiator. She was a mother dragged into the arena. And trailing just behind them, clinging to Rebecca's hand with her backpack bouncing against her legs, was Emily. She should never have been here, but leaving her behind had been impossible. Not after the SUV outside their building last night, not after the message, "Children are leverage. Keep her close if you want her alive." Thomas Harrington was already seated when they entered, the faint smile on his face polished to perfection. He rose slightly, extending a hand Nathan ignored. "Ladies and gentlemen," Thomas began smoothly, turning toward the board as Nathan took the head seat. "Before we discuss Westlake, I feel compelled to raise certain concerns about Nathan's recent judgment." The words slithered into the room, carefully measured. Thomas had rehearsed this. He'd been waiting for this moment. "Judgment?" Eleanor Winters, the eldest board member, raised a silver brow. "Be specific, Thomas." Thomas slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs. Nathan recognized them instantly. Him leaving Rebecca's apartment, him walking hand in hand with Emily in Central Park. Grainy shots, but damning in their suggestion. "As you can see," Thomas said, his voice heavy with manufactured regret, "our CEO has been distracted, involved with a terminated employee, one whose record shows performance issues. He's missed critical meetings. His focus on Westlake has been compromised." Rebecca bristled. "Performance issues?" she hissed under her breath. Nathan placed a hand on hers under the table, a silent plea for calm. Eleanor looked to Nathan. "Is this true?" Nathan didn't flinch. He met every gaze around the table with a steadiness that only came when there was nothing left to hide. "Some of it, yes. I have been in contact with Rebecca Mitchell. Not for the reasons Thomas suggests, but because she uncovered irregularities in the Westlake deal. Irregularities that Thomas has been deliberately concealing." The room rippled with murmurs. "That's absurd," Thomas cut in smoothly. "This is a desperate attempt to discredit me. Westlake is the most lucrative acquisition in our history. I've spent months ensuring its success. By hiding debt under fake subsidiaries?" Rebecca's voice cracked like a whip as she reached into her bag and pulled out the flash drive. "By funneling money into shell corporations like Artemis Global?" Thomas's composure twitched, a hairline crack beneath the smile. "She's lying." "Am I?" Rebecca thrust the drive toward the board. "Because I kept copies. Every discrepancy, every falsified account. I wasn't fired for redundancy. I was silenced because I was too close. And when that didn't shut me up, Thomas's men started watching me, watching my daughter." The word hit the table like a gunshot. Eleanor narrowed her gaze. "Your daughter?" Nathan stood. His voice carried the weight of an empire, but beneath it was something more human, raw and unshakable. "Yes, my daughter, Emily." The little girl who had been swinging her legs in silent boredom looked up at the sound of her name. Her blue eyes, Nathan's eyes, landed on the sea of stunned faces. "She's mine," Nathan continued, his voice steady. "I didn't know until 2 weeks ago, but I know now, and Thomas has been using her existence to keep Rebecca quiet, to keep fraud buried." Gasps spread around the table. James Porter, the most conservative member, leaned forward. "Are we expected to believe this child is yours without proof?" Nathan didn't waver. "You don't need to believe me. You only need to look at her." Emily tilted her head, confused by the attention. "Are these all your friends, Daddy?" she asked innocently. The silence that followed was thunderous. No calculation, no strategy, no lawyered defense could match the devastating simplicity of her words. Several board members exchanged looks. One even raised a hand to their mouth, as though confronted with something too human for the sterile comfort of numbers. "This proves nothing," Thomas snapped, his smile faltering into something uglier. "A convenient child with blue eyes. Anyone could—" Eleanor cut him off sharply. "Enough, Thomas. Sit down." But Thomas didn't sit. His mask cracked further, desperation bleeding through. "Don't you see? He's lost control. He's jeopardizing everything we built for some child he didn't even know existed." "And yet," Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous, "it's you who have been siphoning company funds for years. You who created Artemis Global. You who pushed Westlake, knowing it would bleed us dry while you profited from the collapse." He slammed a set of documents onto the table, copies Rebecca had smuggled out, along with the audit trail Talon had unearthed overnight. Bank transfers, shell accounts, paper trails with Thomas's fingerprints all over them. For the first time, Thomas's smooth veneer shattered. He staggered back a step, eyes darting around the table as though searching for allies and finding none. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. "This is outrageous," he stammered. "You can't prove any of this." "Actually," Nathan said, his tone final, "we can, and I already have. "The authorities are waiting outside this building. Security," he called, and 2 guards entered immediately. "Escort Mr. Harrington from the premises." Thomas's face twisted, rage finally breaking through his polish. "You think this ends with me?" he spat, his voice echoing off the glass. "You think exposing me fixes anything?" James Holloway thought the same thing. And look where that got him. The room went still. Nathan's stomach dropped like a stone. James Holloway, a name he hadn't heard in years, buried deep with his mistakes. Eleanor's voice was cold. "Who is James Holloway, Nathan?" But Nathan couldn't answer. His eyes were locked on Thomas as security dragged him toward the door, shouting, "You can't bury ghosts, Pierce. They'll come for you, and when they do, you'll lose everything you love." The door slammed shut, cutting off his voice, but the echo lingered. Nathan stood frozen, the boardroom hushed around him. He could feel Emily's small hand slip into his, her fingers curling trustingly around his own. He looked down at her, and for the first time in his life, Nathan Pierce, billionaire, visionary, empire builder, didn't see profit or loss, win or fail. He saw the only thing that mattered. But across the glass table, Rebecca's eyes were fixed on him with something he hadn't seen in years. Not anger, not forgiveness, something colder. "What happened to James Holloway?" she asked quietly. Nathan had no answer, not one he could give. And for the first time, he wondered if Thomas was right. Maybe the ghosts weren't finished with him after all. The Pierce estate in Connecticut had always been marketed in glossy magazines as a symbol of old money elegance. 40 acres of rolling lawns, a private lake, a mansion with more rooms than Nathan could count, and a staff trained to appear in van. Ish like ghosts. To the outside world, it was a fortress. To Nathan, it was the only place he thought he could keep Rebecca and Emily safe while the media storm howled outside. But fortresses can also be cages. Emily was the first to fall under its spell. The moment they stepped out of the black SUV, her eyes widened at the sight of the treehouse perched in the old oak by the lake. "A castle in the trees," she squealed, tugging free of Rebecca's hand to run ahead. Nathan watched her sprint across the lawn, his chest tight with something unfamiliar, fear laced with awe. He had spent years surrounded by power brokers, lawyers, and predators disguised as friends. Watching Emily marvel at a treehouse was like remembering oxygen after years underwater. Rebecca, however, looked uneasy. She glanced around at the manicured hedges, the staff waiting discreetly by the doors, the heavy security presence. "It feels like we're being watched," she murmured. "You are," Nathan said bluntly. "That's the point." She shot him a look. "There's a difference between protection and surveillance. Don't confuse the two." Inside, the mansion was immaculate. Art on the walls, curated furniture, a grand piano Nathan hadn't touched in years. Emily darted from room to room, her laughter echoing off marble and glass. Rebecca trailed behind, her unease growing. When Emily disappeared up the staircase, Rebecca finally turned on Nathan. "This isn't a safe house," she said flatly. "This is a museum. She doesn't need chandeliers and a second swimming pool. She needs normalcy. She needs breathing space." Nathan rubbed his temples. Normal is no longer an option, not after the boardroom, not after Thomas. At the mention of his name, Rebecca stiffened. "He's not finished. You know that, don't you?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "He'll be behind bars soon enough. I've handed over everything to the authorities." Rebecca shook her head, frustration flashing in her eyes. "You still don't get it. Thomas isn't just a criminal skimming from accounts. He's dangerous. He knew about Emily before you did. He had men watching us. He knew exactly where to cut me off and how to make it look clean. That's not just fraud, Nathan. That's obsession." Before Nathan could answer, Emily's voice drifted down the staircase. "Daddy, come see. You can see everything from up here." The word hit him like a shot every time she said it. Daddy. A word he'd never expected to hear in his lifetime. He forced a smile, heading toward the stairs. Coming. But before he reached them, his phone buzzed. A secure line. Talon. "Sir," his head of security said, his voice clipped. "We've detected something unusual on the perimeter feeds." Nathan stopped cold. "Unusual how?" "There's interference. Someone's jamming parts of the signal. We've switched to backup systems, but, sir, this isn't kids with a drone. This is professional." Rebecca appeared at the bottom of the stairs, her face pale. She'd heard enough from his tone. "Where?" Nathan demanded. "The northeast fence line," Talon said. "2 figures. We're moving to intercept." Nathan's blood chilled. "Get Emily inside. Now." Rebecca turned, shouting her daughter's name. Emily appeared on the landing, her smile fading as she saw her mother's fear. "What's wrong?" Nothing, sweetheart, Rebecca said quickly, forcing calm. We're going to play a new game, hide and seek, but the important rule is that you don't make a sound, okay? Emily's eyes lit up with excitement, even as Rebecca gripped her hand tightly. Are we spies? She whispered. Yes, Nathan said grimly, and right now, the most important mission is staying hidden. Talon's voice crackled in Nathan's ear. Sir, we've got confirmation. 6 intruders, armed, moving in formation. They're not amateurs. Rebecca's face went ashen. Thomas, she breathed. Nathan crossed to the bookshelf in his study, pressing his palm against a biometric scanner. The shelf slid aside with a low hiss, revealing a reinforced steel door. Emily gasped. A secret door. Go, Nathan ordered, ushering them inside. The safe room was a bunker dressed as an office. Reinforced walls, stocked supplies, an independent power grid. But even here, Nathan felt no calm. Sir, Talon reported through the comms, we've engaged at the perimeter, but they're pushing hard. Whoever sent them knows your estate's layout. They knew where to jam the feeds. Rebecca gripped Nathan's arm. He knows about this place, doesn't he? The safe room? Nathan's silence was answer enough. Rebecca's voice dropped, sharp as glass. James Holloway. He knew about it. And if Thomas knew James... Her words died as the security feeds flickered to life on the wall of monitors. Figures in tactical gear were moving across the estate grounds. In the East Wing camera, one broke off from the group, moving alone, moving with purpose. Nathan zoomed in, his stomach turned to ice. Thomas. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. He's here. Emily tugged Nathan's sleeve, her voice hushed with wonder rather than fear. Daddy, is this still part of the game? Nathan dropped to his knees in front of her, his hands gripping her small shoulders. His voice was low, urgent, breaking. Listen to me, Emily. No matter what happens, you stay with Mommy. You don't open that door unless you hear my voice. Do you understand? Her blue eyes blinked at him, wide and serious. She nodded. Like spies. Rebecca clutched Emily to her chest, her own eyes blazing. Don't you dare play the hero, Nathan. If you die out there, she loses everything she just found. The monitors flickered again. Thomas was inside the East Wing now, moving with chilling precision, his face set in cold determination. Nathan straightened, his jaw steel. He's not getting near her, not while I'm alive. The safe room's silence hummed with electricity, broken only by the sound of gunfire echoing faintly from outside. And then the lights flickered. The security system screamed red alerts across the monitors. Thomas wasn't coming. Thomas was already here. The safe room's hum dimmed to silence. On the monitors, the last of Nathan's security feeds blinked into static. All that remained was the hollow, red warning glow of a breached system. Rebecca clutched Emily tighter, her eyes never leaving the door. Nathan stood rigid, his fists clenched at his sides, every muscle coiled. For years he had fought enemies with spreadsheets, lawyers, and acquisitions. Now the battle had stepped into his home, his bloodline, his conscience. The lock mechanism shuddered. A metallic groan echoed through the chamber. Someone was overriding it from outside. Emily whimpered softly. Rebecca pressed a hand over her daughter's ear. Don't look, she whispered. Don't listen. The door screeched open. Thomas Harrington stepped inside, framed by the glow of the red alarms. Gone was the polished CFO, the cultivated smile, the veneer of control. His face was gaunt, fury etched deep, eyes burning with the kind of hate that only comes from years of obsession. In his hand, a gun gleamed black under the fluorescent light. Is this what it's come to, Nathan? Thomas's voice was a raw scrape. The great Pierce hiding in his bunker, clutching his secret family lot. Ike, some street thug caught in the wrong deal? Nathan positioned himself between Thomas and Rebecca, his body the only shield he had. You're not leaving this house with them. Thomas laughed, bitter and hollow. Them? You mean her? He nodded toward Emily, his eyes narrowing on the child's face. The girl with your eyes. The girl who should never have existed. Emily, sensing the malice though not the meaning, buried her face into her mother's sweater. Rebecca held her tighter, her own body trembling, but her gaze locked on Thomas like steel. If you touch her... I don't want to touch her, Thomas spat. I want him to look at her and see what he destroyed. His gun wavered toward Nathan. Do you even remember James Holloway? The name crashed into the room like thunder. Nathan stiffened, his throat closing around the ghost that had haunted him for years. Of course you do, Thomas hissed. Your college roommate, your partner, the man who trusted you, who built Pierce Investments with you, until you bled him dry, bought out his shares for pennies, blacklisted him across Wall Street. You crushed him because he dared question your vision. Rebecca's eyes darted to Nathan, horror creeping into her face. Is it true? Nathan's voice cracked, low and raw. James wanted to take the company in a reckless direction. You destroyed him, Thomas roared, his composure shattering. He lost everything. His company, his investors, his family. Do you know what it feels like to watch someone you love disintegrate under another man's ambition? His voice broke. He was my brother-in-law, my family, and when he took his life, he left a note with your name in it. The silence after the confession was suffocating. Rebecca stared at Nathan, betrayal sharp in her eyes. Emily clutched tighter, sensing the storm, but not its cause. Nathan's chest felt like it was caving in. The truth, buried under years of empire building, was finally unmasked. I was ruthless, he admitted hoarsely. I thought that's what it took to win. I thought cutting him out was protecting my vision, but I never wanted him dead. Thomas sneered. Intentions don't matter, consequences do. And now it's your turn to lose everything. He raised the gun. Rebecca cried out, pulling Emily behind her. Please, she's just a child. Collateral, Thomas said coldly. The same way James's children were collateral when you ruined him. Why should yours be any different? The gun wavered closer. Something inside Nathan snapped. He stepped forward, his voice booming, raw, unstoppable. Because she's mine. The declaration rang through the safe room, shaking more than just the air. For 6 years, Nathan had lived in ignorance, buried in ambition, chasing empires. In this moment, stripped bare, he was only one thing, a father. Thomas's eyes flickered. Doubt? Surprise? It didn't matter. Nathan lunged. The gun discharged, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Sparks rained as the bullet slammed into the steel wall. Nathan grappled with Thomas, the two men crashing against the reinforced desk. Years of boardroom civility vanished. This was primal, brutal. Thomas fought with the desperation of vengeance. Nathan fought with the desperation of a father. Rebecca shielded Emily, crouched against the wall, whispering over and over, "Don't look, baby. Don't look." The gun skittered across the floor, spinning toward Rebecca. She froze, eyes darting between the weapon and the men locked in combat. "Nathan!" she cried. Thomas slammed Nathan into the wall, his hand closing around his thigh. "For what? You think you can fix this with one child? You think being a daddy wipes your sins clean?" Nathan's vision blurred, his lungs burned. Somewhere in the haze, he saw Emily's small face, her wide eyes watching, her trust absolute. That was enough. He drove his knee into Thomas's ribs, twisting, slamming the man down. Rebecca snatched the gun, her hands shaking. She raised it, but her eyes locked on Emily's terrified gaze. She couldn't. She lowered it to the floor, sliding it toward Nathan instead. Nathan grabbed it, pressing the barrel against Thomas's chest. The room froze. Thomas's lip curled. "Do it. Be the ruthless bastard you've always been. Kill me and prove James was right." Nathan's hand trembled. For years he had defined himself by the kill, the merger, the deal, the cutthroat decision that secured victory. Now he stood on the edge of another kill, but this one wasn't about billions. It was about the man he would be in his daughter's eyes. He lowered the gun. Thomas's eyes widened in disbelief. "You don't have the guts." "No," Nathan said softly, his voice rough but steady. "I finally have something worth more than guts. I have her." He looked at Emily, whose tears glistened as she clung to Rebecca. "And I won't let her first memory of me be murder." At that moment, the pounding of boots thundered down the hall. Talon and his men stormed into the room, weapons drawn, flashlights blinding. In seconds, Thomas was wrenched away, cuffed, dragged out kicking and cursing. Nathan collapsed against the wall, the gun clattering to the floor. His chest heaved, sweat dripping down his temples. Rebecca rushed to his side, Emily still clinging to her. "Daddy!" Emily sobbed, breaking free to throw herself into his arms. Nathan caught her, holding her so tight he thought he might never let go. For the first time, he didn't care about the empire outside these walls. All he cared about was the small, fragile weight of his daughter pressed against his chest. Rebecca's eyes met his, a storm still brewing, but softened now by something reluctant. Respect? Gratitude? Hope? Nathan spoke, his voice cracking. "I can't change what I did to James. I can't erase the man I was, but I can be better for her. For you, if you'll let me." Rebecca hesitated, searching his face. Finally, she whispered, "Then prove it. Not with money, not with power, with time. With her." Outside, dawn broke over the estate, washing the blood-stained night in pale gold. The police cars, the flashing lights, the shattered illusions, all faded behind the glass. Inside, 3 people clung to one another, a broken man, a wary woman, and a child who had unknowingly rewritten both their lives. For Nathan Pierce, the visionary billionaire who once believed empires were built on ruthless ambition, the truth was simple. His empire had nearly cost him everything, but in the end, it gave him what he never knew he needed: a second chance. A family.